You're recording.
Awesome. All right. Hi, and welcome to Peeling the Onion podcast. Tonight, I'm going to just start one more time. Hi, welcome to Peeling the Onion podcast. Today, we have a very special guest, Meghan Telpner. She's a Toronto-based author, speaker, nutritionist, and founder of the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. She's written 2 best-selling books, Undiet, Eat Your Way to Vibrant Health, and the Undiet Cookbook. Meghan's success in cultivating a global community of undiet enthusiasts and culinary nutrition experts has garnered her a feature in Forbes and ranked her as one of the top 100 female entrepreneurs in Canada. If you want to hear more about her after this great interview, please visit her website at meghantelpner.com. In the meantime, hang with us because we have a lot of great. Sorry, we'll just edit that out. I'm gonna stop there actually. And can we just hang out before and so I can mute my phone? I should have done that before.
Yes.
Okay, I'll just edit. We're good. Don't worry about it.
Edit that out.
Yeah, I had overlooked that.
We can always pre-record that part again.
Yeah, that's what editing is for. Anyway, okay, so let's go in. Cheryl, why don't you go ahead and jump in and I'll tighten that up.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks so much for being here, Meghan. We're so excited to have you. We've both been following your work for a long time. And so we're so excited to have you here.
Thank you. I'm so excited to finally connect with both of you.
I know, live on Zoom. So I would love, how I got to know your work as actually my wife was a big fan of what you were doing, and we ended up taking your everyday herbal class. But we would love to just hear from you a little bit more about your culinary nutrition school and how you got into culinary nutrition to begin with. And
yes, so like many people, it was my own health crisis that landed me in a position of needing to take responsibility for my health. I wasn't finding any answers in the specialists and doctors I was seeing, and had this like lurking room in my apartment I hadn't really spent much time in called the kitchen. And it seemed to me that if I was going to figure out how to reclaim my health, and I was young, I was just 25 at the time, I was gonna have to learn how to cook. And so that was sort of what sparked the interest initially. And I studied holistic nutrition, but there was still a lack of practical nutrition skills, like how we take what we're learning in books and apply it in the kitchen and really focus on, the 3 meals a day or however many people are choosing to eat.
Right.
And so I started my business, a long time ago, almost 13 years ago, by teaching small community-based cooking classes here in downtown Toronto, where I still live. And that continued to expand. As I was learning to cook new things, I would create new classes based off my newest recipes. I was not a cook going into this. And it kept growing and growing and growing. The demand kept growing. And the ultimate mission I had way back in 2008 that I still have now is to empower people that they can transform their health and subsequently their lives by changing their approach to what they're eating. And so it started out as really community-focused cooking classes where a group of people, we'd cook together and sit down at the table and share a meal. And it continues to be that. However, we've since grown and shifted and changed. And in 2013, we took what I was doing in person online and launched the Academy of Culinary Nutrition in 2014. And in that time, we've now graduated over 2,500 people in 70 countries, empowering them to become the teachers. So we're teaching the teachers in how they can effectively, inclusively, kindly, judgment-freely share this information in their homes around their own kitchen tables with their friends and family. And for a lot of our graduates, creating or igniting businesses in the field, whether it's creating products, doing customized menu planning, private chef work, the sky's the limit in how our graduates have ended up applying it. And that's sort of been a very, for the cheesiest cliche possible to say, an organic evolution, which it has been. And it's just been about teaching this in a way that really makes it fun and really invites people to, take what they want, leave what's not right just yet, and apply it in their lives, which is what's most important of all.
That's amazing. I think it's such an important, thing. I was telling my friend the other day, I was like, during this odd pandemic-ish time, I'm amazed like how many people are like, I don't know how to cook, and like they're just like, I have no idea. And, it's like I'm always, telling my own students, I'm like, eating doesn't have to be hard. Like follow, Michael Pollan's food rules, or, like eat food, mostly plants, care about where your food comes from, but that, even just cooking is like little simple things. You don't have to have a
Yeah.
lot.
I think a great lesson that hopefully everyone is learning from what we've experienced over the last year or so is that our lives have become so convenient that it became our own detriment. That you can order anything to your door instantly. And the critical components of not just health, but fulfillment and happiness and connection had become dismantled and so disconnected that in what we've all experienced, whether you wanted to or not, everyone is spending more time in the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, so what tips do you have for people? Like, I know something, this year was definitely, everything's a silver lining, of course. But, one of my big shifts is like how much I love having a dinner party and, going to great restaurants, and we support still like great restaurants, and, and have people that we, eat and commune with and stuff like that. But I know for a lot of people, like, so much of not just cooking is community, but eating is community. And it's like, what suggestions do you have for people during this time that,
Yeah. So, I know in some parts of the world, people are now able to dine together. Here in Toronto, we celebrate some of the strictest rules in North America where we cannot. And it's exceptionally challenging for people who live alone to even have the inspiration at this point to make themselves a meal. And I think no matter where you're at or what your circumstances are, the key place to start is with something you want to enjoy. So if you think of a vegetable or whatever it is you want to have, and find a creative way to make that. So that if you're starting with one recipe and doing one dish from scratch that's new, that allows you to challenge yourself, to be creative, to try something new, to optimally eat something that's seasonal, which is when you can do the least to it and have it be most delicious. Like here in Ontario, where I live, we're just getting some asparagus in. And asparagus in April and May is way more delicious than asparagus in January coming from who knows where or grown, without any connection with nature.
Right.
And so that alone gives you way more flavor, way more cost effectiveness, way more nutrition, that to make it delicious, all you do is like steam it and toss it with olive oil and put some salt on. And like, there you have something. And so I think what people commonly think of when they consider having to cook from scratch and make all their own meals is that it has to be elaborate and complicated, and they get overwhelmed and then stop before they started. And so if you can keep it super simple, start with a basic ingredient and the most easy and delicious way to prepare it, that's going to give you motivation and confidence. You can start to take on more and more things. And so my basic recommendation for people is usually just start with one new recipe a week, not 21 new recipes for every meal you're going to make. Start with one. And if you love it, that becomes part of your rotation. And next week, grab a new one so that you constantly have a few new things coming in that keeps you inspired and excited, but not so overwhelmed that, every meal is like this 2-hour production.
yes.
Absolutely. Well, I'm curious too. I mean, you and Josh on your podcast that's about all of these topics that you cover in the academy. It's called Today is the Day, right? That's your
Yes.
podcast with your
Yeah.
husband, Josh. It's wonderful. And I've really enjoyed just breaking down all of these great ideas, hearing your ideas for meal planning and meal prepping, getting in the kitchen and getting motivated, and also just tons of valuable health tips. But to that point that you make about just taking one recipe at a time, you also talk a lot about the importance of a whole foods diet in the first place. And can you just break that down for us? Can you give the listener out there who's trying to wrap his or her head around the fact that they have to stop eating so much processed food and start getting this quote unquote whole foods diet? and why the heck that even matters?
Yeah. So what's really incredible about eating a whole foods diet, and the way I define that is where the majority of processing happens in your own home kitchen. So it's as close to where it came off the tree or the plant or off the farm when it lands in your house as possible.
Right.
And what's incredible when you start eating that way is that most of the rules that we think we have to follow no longer apply. They're not relevant because you are controlling what's going into every meal. So you don't have to think about the sugar and the salt and the fat and all these things that we think we need, a full calculator to figure out and how much we're getting to make sure we're not going over. It goes away because it'd be very difficult to add as much processed foods, oxidized fats, processed salt, and processed sugar into food that you make from scratch. Because just measuring out, you'd be like, this is not right. So if you can do most of that in your kitchen, you're kind of set. And that's why I don't ever advocate for one type of eating or one dietary philosophy. It's that if you can do the work in your kitchen, a lot of the challenges we're seeing in dietary patterns and eating habits and health challenges resolve themselves with minimal effort. And so I would never say like, stop eating fast food, stop eating processed food, but let's instead look on the silver lining side, the abundant side, and say, let's eat more of this. Let's have more of this available in our house, and the rest falls away. And it's been really interesting because my son, who's almost 4, we there's this one snack we'll sometimes buy at the health food store, and then we've just saved the packages and make them from scratch and put them in this package form. So he thinks he's getting like a store-bought snack, but he's come to learn that we don't stock snacks in our house. We stock ingredients to make the snacks. And we always have yummy things around, like muffins or little energy balls, or sometimes these homemade chocolate treats. But he knows that it's something that we make. And because we've made it, when he wants one, I don't have to necessarily limit it in the same way or be as mindful about it, or, it's never treated as a reward. And those rules, like, we're programming him, it's sort of a bad word for it, but we're teaching him this way pretty early on. And I think this needs to apply to all of us, especially under times of stress. So that's sort of the approach. And if you think about it another way, when a food is harvested off the land and goes to a factory before it comes to you, they're removing all of the living and vital components that are most likely to go rancid or rot. And it's those living vital components that make us living and vital. So if those are being stripped away in the factory and then being replaced by synthetic shelf-stable versions, we are getting a subpar product. Like, we are consuming something that is nutrient deficient straight out of the box, which then leads to our own nutritional deficiencies and imbalances, even when we think we're buying all the right things and eating all the right things because the package says so.
That's tricky. I think teaching kids at that fundamental level is so critical. And also, though, reprogramming our assumptions about what we're grabbing off the shelf. My husband is the child of baby boomer parents, and baby boomer parents were taught that formula was better, and that all of these easy to grab, from a can to something frozen. I mean, it's not all frozen food is bad, certainly, but in comes the TV dinner, right? Yeah. And certainly trying to, once my husband got older and into college and understood all these health consequences of how his parents were feeding him, and they were Italian, it was like, eat, the more you eat, it's fine. It doesn't matter what you're eating, just eat. And so eventually it started to add up. It started to add up for him in terms of his dental health. It shows up in cardiovascular health as an adult. And so I think we have to deprogram ourselves. We are being taught so much messaging around what we're eating. And so I'm thinking about how this messaging gets translated and through the Academy of Culinary Nutrition. How are you teaching culinary nutritionists and your students to sort of help educate their clients and their students once they've graduated? Like, what's the language that you're using in terms of this? You mentioned a gentle and non-judgmental approach to telling people, hey, you're kind of eating the wrong thing. We need to sort of rethink this.
Well, we would never say that, even if we're thinking it. So,
Right.
so we always try and,
Yeah.
we always, like, I teach from a place of, look at this head of broccoli. Like, what a miracle this head of broccoli is that came from this little tiny seed. And what is the potential in this broccoli? So if broccoli is high in chlorophyll, that's really good for our blood. And it also has something called indole-3 carbinol, which is a cancer preventative phytonutrient. Like, everything we're afraid of out there, we can be protected from with the food that we eat, or partially, or at least preventatively. And so we always try and focus on what we're getting with the choices we make, as opposed to what we might be missing out on or losing by the choices we're making. And if you can approach it from that way, it was interesting. I was speaking with someone the other day, well, maybe a couple of months ago, and it was about a job with the company. And she was concerned. She's like, my family's worried that I'm going to start making them, change their eating habits or eat healthier. And I was like, imagine that. Imagine if your exposure to this information inspires people to stop eating or doing the things that increase their risk of degenerative disease. Like, is that something to fear? Is that terrible? And I mean, we're seeing it right now, like with the pandemic and the cracks that have formed. And it's not just about the virus, it's showing the breakdown in resilience and how our habits have increased the risk of complications from something that for most people won't be affected by, but the most vulnerable, it's a real risk and a real fear. And so it just goes to show, what can happen if we each individually take on the responsibility of our health and do what we can, from wherever we're at. It can only be part of a greater solution. And so if we use language like that, suddenly it makes like, well, you're not letting me have a fast food burger anymore. Like, I never said that, but is that really the direction you want to go? And like, if you share with people the how to do better, the why it's worth considering, and you leave it to them to make that decision, you're no longer forcing someone's life into a direction they're not ready for. It's they're making those decisions. And if they can make those decisions, understanding the reasons why, that goes so much further than me being a nutritionist saying, no, that's bad and this is good and eat more of this and that's toxic and that's poison. Like, that's going to create the most resistance of all, and that's not helpful for anyone.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes, which is animals don't need nutritionists.
Yeah.
And it's like, if we're really, if we are thinking and living like animals, it's like, I was watching my cat the other day out in the backyard, and she's like, frolicking, running around, but like nibbling on grass and like catching flies, but eating the fly, like they know, like, but like they know what to do, right? And it's like, if really in theory, I'm like, if we just think about ourselves as animals and Mother Nature, as we have been put on this earth as, it's like, we don't need all these other things, and I think it's really, it's really fascinating. I have this experience right now. My father-in-law has been going through cancer treatment, but he's also been letting me do functional medicine and work on his nutrition. And, he's 78, and like, he's come around to this reality of like, wow, when I'm eating better and I'm drinking more water and I'm thinking through these things, like, I feel so much better. And he's starting to see this breakdown, and he's starting to understand. And I just said to him, I was like, but I was like, this is how our family eats for the rest of our lives. And I was like, and the reality of like, he's starting to see that like, your health is wealth,
I went through a similar with my father. When he was 60, he was diagnosed with cancer, and he'd been very resistant to, I'd already been in nutrition school for a few years, or I'd already been in the nutrition field, I should say. And there was one time when I'd made like a quinoa salad at the cottage, or at the family cottage. And he said to me, I feel like you're feeding me this quinoa with contempt. And I'm like, you're right. I made this for you because I hate you. And we laugh about it now, but it's this idea that, I don't do this work to make anyone feel bad about anything. I'm not chasing someone down the street being like, what are you eating? It's like, if you seek my guidance, I will help inspire you to make the right decisions for who you are, for what's right for you. I have no idea. I don't know what you should be eating. I don't know you. I don't know your life, but it's the laws of Mother Nature. And we know that the more connected you get with the planet, because we are not just like plunked on here as observers of the ecosystem, we're of the ecosystem. We're not the sole living beings on the planet that are poisoned by sunshine, where everything else thrives on it. So it becomes that understanding of the relationship we have with our environment, with our surroundings. And the more in sync you can become with that relationship, the more vitality you'll begin to experience. And of course, that's no guarantee. Like, I walk barefoot in the forest, so I'm never getting sick in my life. You can't say that, but you could say that, well, you know what, I might have a better outcome because of it. Or if something does happen, I might have a quicker recovery, or, it's an insurance policy. The best kind you can ever invest in is your health today and what that can build for you long term.
Yeah, I think about so many clients, and I'm sure you've experienced this in your practice, Megan, is that they're so afraid to change, or they have to make all these concerted efforts to make all these separate meals for all their family members, because God forbid they expose or they challenge somebody else's view of the world. And what you're saying, all that you said so far, is such a reassurance, I believe. And I wonder if I'm sure you agree with this, but just to reiterate, the idea that change has to come from within, right? It has to be. You're right. It has to be somebody else's idea for that to stick. But a lot of times, change around that person, it becomes threatening.
Absolutely, and I think that, and I see it with my students all the time as they go through the program. And this September will be our 10th run of it, and so I know the ebbs and flows. Now I can anticipate what will happen. And there's always a few students who experience a resistance from those around them, being that it's all good when we're all on the same plane, but suddenly someone is moving, and I don't want to say like higher or better, but to a different place that person may not be ready to venture into. And the only way you can ever inspire change is with your own actions and consistency. Yeah. So if you start living well and feeling well, and then it radiates out your eyes and your skin, and your language starts to change, and your energy and how you move in the world, people notice that. That's a frequency. Without getting too woo-woo, it's a frequency we operate on that changes. And whether someone can consciously acknowledge that or not, they can feel, and they'll start to say, what are you doing differently? Like, you seem different, you look different. And that, whatever I tell my students is, don't worry about everybody else. You have to be consistent and lead by example, and also only make one meal. If people don't eat it, they don't have to eat it. But even in our house, way back in 2019, when we used to have people over for meals that didn't necessarily always align with us, I didn't go out and buy them diet soda because I knew that's what they liked. Like, I would only serve people food that I felt good about serving people. And that was sort of that's my boundary. I'm also in this field, and like, I don't have to defend it at this point, having been doing this for so long, but that's just the expectation. When I go to other people's homes, I don't expect them to cater to my needs. I'll ask what they're preparing, and I'll say, that sounds delicious. I'm going to bring something else, or I'm going to bring something to contribute. Or if it's not something that my son can have, I'll be like, I'm going to bring something for him. But, being consistent and not ever doing something or consuming something that is harmful to yourself, that isn't right for you, to make someone else feel better, is never going to be an appropriate solution.
It's true. I was thinking a lot about, as you were talking about, the idea of judgment, your father's sense of contempt, the sense that we, with this new information, with making these changes, we can come across as judgmental. Some of that fear there that comes up is judgment. And so it's powerful. Change is scary, and we never want to be judgmental. How do you address, how have you addressed over the years, as you had to, shift your diet and create this whole new world that you lived in, not come across or preachy?
Yeah, I'm sure I sound preachy to a lot of people, but that's okay. I think, what's interesting is that my diet has, I don't even like calling it diet, it's my lifestyle has continuously evolved over the 15 years that I've been aware of, that my actions affect the outcome. And what's interesting is that I'm continuously judged, or people make assumptions about me. And often they make assumptions about the way I eat based on what their ideal is. And so I just let that go. I'm like, if they think that's how I eat and that's what they're striving for, and they think that's what they need to do and that's going to work for them, that's okay. I've also experienced a lot of the you'll see, especially since becoming pregnant and then having a child, being like, oh, well, you want to do that, but you'll see. You'll see when your child starts going to birthday parties. You'll see when this happens. You'll see. And I'm like, I'm still waiting and I haven't seen, because, our set point is such that I don't waver it. And like, I'm not so foolish to think that I can control what my child's going to eat for the rest of his life. But at 4 years old, I absolutely can. And I can educate him. And, he knows what we do and why we do it. And he asks where things come from. And I mean, he's not even quite 4 yet. So, I'm still waiting. And like, so I said to my husband, Josh, I'm like, when do we get to start saying, see, like, you'll see what we can do with this. Like, you'll see how we can get him, excited about certain foods and wanting to make muffins full of zucchini and, being excited and like what he considers a special treat being dried mango. Like, I'm going to try and get away with that as long as I can. And I'm sure there'll be no doubt that he'll be like, what you used to do when I was little? I'm like, yep. And you had no clue. And so it's fine. Just, you're healthy now, be happy. And so, I continuously deal with that. And when you make a choice to live healthfully, again, by one's own definition, by default, you're going against the paradigms of what we're, of convenience of life. Like, you can't just stop on the highway and grab food anywhere on a road trip. You don't just fly somewhere and eat whatever they're serving on the plane or whatever's in the airport. You don't stay in a hotel and just, eat whatever's on the menu. That's a conscious choice and a conscious way of living that can feel exhausting and overwhelming. But you also, you recognize where your limits are, what your set point is, what is worth it, what's not worth it, and you find your balance within it. And I don't think anyone should ever have to justify that to anybody.
I agree. And I think also, like, with the judgment thing, it's like, I was telling somebody the other day, I was like, when you realize the change, when you change your food, you've gone on a healing journey, like whatever it is, because like, we all have our own stories, right? And the importance of that story, I was like, you don't want to sit on your hands and be like, I did nothing. No, you want to like scream from the mountaintops, like, yo, this is amazing and it works, right? Yeah. Or this is like, it's like you can, I know when I started my healing journey, it was like I had this, like, I don't know, it was like the clouds had parted, like Jesus, Moses, the sea guy parted, like this moment of like, oh my gosh. And the day like the brain fog lifted and it was like somebody took socks out of my head. And I was like, is this what life is like for everybody else? Right. And it's like, you don't want to sit on your hands. You don't want to.
I mean, that's how I ended up doing what I'm doing. Cause I'm like, how come no one else knows this? Like, why didn't anyone tell me this? Like,
right.
Like everyone needs to know this, and it still frustrates me to no end that, I get like the la, 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 like covering the ears and singing and they just don't want it. But it's, the change is hard. Change can be scary. And, I remind my students both in my culinary nutrition expert program and in the business coaching I do that the only thing to fear is the ever repeating known, which is removing the realm of possibility. Like if you're constantly doing the same things that are having the same results and you're experiencing the same symptoms or the same challenges or the same frustrations, that's when you got to do something differently. Yeah. When it comes to our diet or our health, it's not going to be doing something differently for 2 weeks and then expecting that to last the rest of our lives when we go back to what we were doing before. It's a change. And what's incredible and what you kind of just have to take a leap of faith and trust is that you never want to go back. Like once you had, the socks and the cotton out of your head and you could think clearly again, like you would never want to go back. You don't want to go back to sleep once you've woken up. I was like, oh, you know what? I don't want to know that. Like, forget it. I don't want to know how to wake up in the morning feeling amazing and excited about what's happening that day. Like, I want to wake up after having the TV on all night with a migraine and body pain and having a coffee and a muffin and then being constipated. And like, like no one wants to go back to that. And so part of it's just trusting that there is a sticky transition to the whole process, but that you don't just come out on the bright side. Like it just gets brighter and brighter and brighter and brighter. Like there's no limit to the potential.
Mm-hmm. It also becomes like a nice groove. I mean, I love that sticky transition. You are so right. It is when I made this leap in 2007 to go gluten-free, and because I was falling asleep at my desk. I was on, I was actually still smoking cigarettes, believe it or not. I was on so much caffeine. There was so much going on. I was surviving in New York City on bagels and pizza and going to graduate school. It was a little too much and my body was stressed. But I feel you that that sticky transition, I feel like they're just like everything. And the way I've described this is like a spiral. Like we're all, if you can imagine it like a cone and traveling up that cone in a spiral fashion, that we're going to keep going in circles and circles. And we might have to come back to the same place we were before, but we're armed with new material and new information. And there might be some more sticky situations that pop up and we're going to have to navigate through those. I'm curious, and this is something that we wanted to pick your brain on as we, transition out of a deep, and I know, I'm sorry it's not happening in Toronto.
Oh, am I?
Right. The fact that we are starting to come out of this quarantine phase is that how we talked a lot about, how we eat, or what we've talked about what we eat, but thinking about how we eat and who we eat with. We'd love to kind of pick your brain about that. Why does it matter how we eat? What does that have to do? Like meaning, and I mean how, I don't mean like, with our hands or with a fork or like just putting our face into a bowl. What I'm asking is like how, meaning where, when, and with whom we consume a meal.
Yeah. And I think that I think we all know how fundamental community is and connection is, and real life connection that, I'm enjoying speaking with both of you through the screen, but it'd be way better if we were around a table together.
Sure.
With food, hopefully.
Right.
So I think that what we're seeing is that, and hopefully what people stay connected with, and for those of us in Ontario, don't forget how powerful and how essential the breaking of bread is with loved ones, and gluten-free or not, like the connection that happens through sitting down and sharing a meal together is one of the most powerful ways to connect. And it's vital for not just our mental health, but our physical health, for the hormones that get released, for the neurotransmitters, for the just the simple joy of laughter and learning something new from somebody. Or, I belong to this group that obviously hasn't been meeting the same way. And it, as an introvert, this is my greatest fear, but showing up to dinners once a month with people I'd never met, being, with assigned seating, sitting next to people I had never, like no clue anything about them. And it was, and has been, I mean, now we meet online and it's a different situation, but profoundly, like one of the most profoundly changing experiences of my life. And then I realized, wait a second, I actually used to do this to people too in my kitchen. I knew everyone coming, but they didn't know each other. And people meet who ended up being roommates. And I always wanted a love connection to form, but it didn't happen. That was my goal. Like I wanted people to meet and fall in love and get married here. But I did have one student move here for for a course when I was running my full course, who connected with an old friend while she was here, and they got married and they have 3 kids. So I feel like that was the closest. But all that to say, slowing down, taking time to smell your food, the cephalic phase of digestion that gets your body ready to eat, as opposed to, scarfing it down in front of the computer or watching the evening news, which should be like, that's like a digestive nightmare. It changes the taste of the food. It changes the appreciation of what you're consuming. It changes your awareness of it. It changes how things taste. I think of, my mom always made roast chicken dinners. Like that's like her signature meal. And yes, she would make them, she'll bring them, can I bring you a roast chicken dinner? Like if we're having a rough week, and like, that's one of the things she does. But when we can sit down and eat it as a family, all of us, with the kids running wild, like it's a different experience of that meal. And that is intangible, invaluable, can't be replicated. There's nothing that replaces that.
One of the big things I've been telling my students during this time, and something that, I myself had been practicing, is I was like, just taking the time to even have gratitude for the food that you're getting ready to take. Taking a moment to honor the farmers who grew it, the drivers, the people who work at the, whether it's a grocery store or the farmer's market, right? And I was like, and even in its own way, as like, it feels like you're embracing community.
Yeah.
Just taking a moment to pause, take a deep breath, recognize, and then like dig in and enjoy, something amazing, right?
Yeah.
And so, it's definitely something I've been teaching in my gut health class and to my own clients. And it's just, something that we've really embraced in the last year much more deeply, right? It's like,
yeah. And it's never too soon to start. With my son, I know we're wrapping up, but he doesn't watch much videos or TV. And when he does, it's very specific. And I was making with him little homemade gluten-free donuts, and we put nutmeg in them. And I was like, do you know what this is? Like I had a whole little nutmeg. He's like, no. I was like, it grows on a tree inside of fruit. And he's like, really? And so we watched this whole video on how they harvest nutmeg and where it comes from. And so even at that age, they can start to have that gratitude and the appreciation of, if you look at your meal, all the different people and, like you said, Cheryl, where everything comes from. That's the why. Like that helps you understand the value in what you're doing and why it's worth the effort. Every bit of effort is worth it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We so appreciate you being on. We know you have to pop on to another call and so forth, but thank you so much for making the time to join us, Meghan. We'll put it in the footnotes and everything, the show notes about, how people can reach you, but at meghantelpner.com. Go check them out. We cannot highly recommend. I took your everyday herbal class, which was fantastic. So if you're looking for basic ways even to get into herbal medicine, and you have like a toxic-free living.
Healthy home. We have a healthy at home course. Yes. And then our full certification program starts in September, and that's at culinarynutrition.com.
All right. So you guys can go sign up there, and we appreciate you being here. And hopefully you get to enjoy a great restaurant also soon.
I hope so. Thank you both so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, Meghan.